you. Good morning, everyone. Board of Directors meeting of HART of Friday, September 15th. We did have some technical problems, although we thought we would start at 8:30. It is exactly 9. I think it's the first time we started at exactly 9. But the cameras are fixed, so we should be okay. So with that, I'm going to call this meeting to order, and I'm going to take roll first. Kika Bukowski,
Present.
Anthony Alto,
Present.
Don Takeuchi Apuna is excused. Michelle Chun Brungraber is excused. Natalie Iwasa. Here. Roger Morton.
Present.
Joe O'Donnell. Oh, he's excused because I think he has an event today. Ed Sniffen is going to be arriving later, but for now he's excused. Art Tolentino.
Present.
Edwin Young.
Here.
Robert Yu.
Present.
And the chair is here. So with that, first of all, I'd like to ask if anyone in the audience is here to present testimony on any item on the agenda, any item. No one in the audience. Is there anyone online? I did receive an email from Chun Jones.
That's all we have, yes.
Okay. So members, you should have a copy. Chun Jones has sent us an email. June James, sorry, June James. I should know that. And she has 3 comments. One is about the HART website. And with all due respect, Lori, I gotta tell you, I don't like the website either. I got a hell of a time finding anything. But anyway, June James has that comment. 2 is the name change to Skyline. God, he's listening in on my conversation. And the third item is regarding the new rules. So now that what I'm going to do on the new rules, just so that everyone's aware, leave comments after the cutoff time, and these are from Laurie, for example, Corporation Counsel, the Attorney General, and these comments came in after the time that we can actually put it out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to defer that matter to the next meeting or call a special meeting on it, but I did want everyone to know that. I also wanted to be very clear that this was the product of the rules of the pigs, so it's not the final rules. And the reason why we have all of these comments, which are great, is because we want to hear how people are interpreting the rules so that we have an understanding, so that there's no confusion on the, and it looks like Chun's raising the same thing that Civil Beat did. And that's the issue. I think the main contention is that maybe we were not clear that the state board makes public statements and we're talking about official public statements, that if the state appointees make an official public statement, the public should know that who they represent, because they're not appointed under the charter. They're appointed pursuant to Act 1. And just so that everyone is clear, I brought the legislative history on Act 1. It is we're talking about a specific provision of Act 1, which is, I think it's almost the second to the last article, if my memory serves me. Yes, it's part 10. And the legislative history on it is to requires the Senate President and House Speaker to each appoint 2 non-voting ex-official members of the Board of Directors of the County Rapid Transportation Authority of a county with a population greater than 500,000 to ensure the appropriate use of state authorized funds to finance a mass transit program. So the purpose for which they are appointed is set forth in law. So anyway, with all of that, we will be deferring that matter, but I do thank Chun James, I wish she was here, for her comments. Any member who have any other comment on that? Any wish to say anything? Anyone else? Cindy? Okay, Cindy, Chun hasn't called in or anything. Okay, with that, members, we're going to move off of the that, and we're going to move to the executive director's update. And again, at each one of the agenda items, we'll be calling for public testimony. So is there anyone here to testify on the executive director's update? And the focus is the full funding grant agreement amendment. No one, nobody online? Okay, with that, it's yours.
Morning, Chair and
Morning.
board members. So just to give an update on the FFGA amendment update. So there has been back and forth between ourselves and FTA on the actual language of the full funding grant agreement. There are some tables that needed to be updated. So that was done as late as this week. Backing up a bit, so the environmental reevaluation has been completed both on the federal side and the state side. The state side has been completed. The federal side, it is done, it is complete. FTA has approved, so there is a posting right now for 150 days. The FFGA itself, as I mentioned, is in the hands of FTA. My understanding is their legal still needs to review. Then it will go to the secretary for a review and approval. That's a 30-day process. And after that, it will go to posting for Congress. That's another 30-day process. I understand it is not concurrent. It's in sequence. And then once that is done, it comes back to us. And hopefully in one of those time periods, we can get a draft to at least share with the board so that the board can review. And then once board approves, we still need to go to council. So the time frame, we're still thinking about December to get this all wrapped up.
December of this year?
Yes.
Unless my math is wrong, I think it's more than that.
It might be, Chair. We're giving guidance. We're given guidance from FTA, and they're still hoping for end of this year, December time frame.
So the posting for 100, what was the posting that is going on now?
The reevaluation, and FTA says we don't have to wait for that to conclude in order for the FFGA to be amended.
FFGA to be, I'm sorry, I can't
Does
hear you.
not need to. The FFGA amendment does not need to wait until that 150-day posting is complete.
But doesn't that have to pass before they send it to the secretary?
That's not my understanding. Maybe Kathleen can clarify that.
So how many days is this posting? What did you say, Laurie? How many
150
days
days.
is the posting?
150 days, Chair.
150 days.
Yeah.
It's odd. It's usually 180 or something. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Chair members, Kathleen Kelly, Deputy Corporation Counsel. The 150-day posting is a limitations period. So it is that's the window of opportunity that anybody who has any disagreement with the FTA's decision can bring an appeal or an action.
So just so that I'm clear, because I had heard earlier that during this 150-day period, the document could be executed, I think was the word that was relayed to us. So it's really, I can't see if you have a right to appeal or you have a right to challenge in 150 days, that somehow you can proceed with some kind of signature or anything on the FFGA.
It's like it's similar to a statute of limitations.
Right.
So the action is valid. It's just that there's a time bar. So similar with the governor's decision, the limitations period has passed, but that doesn't preclude us from moving forward. If there is an action and if that action is successful, we may have to stop whatever we're doing.
But
But
what
it
about the
doesn't.
role of the Secretary of Transportation?
Yes, so it will first go to FTA headquarters.
Right.
It will then go to the Secretary of Transportation for 30 days, and then it goes to Congress for a 30-day notification period.
But you're saying that we can proceed to execute these documents in that period of time? Because
That's-
we can't execute because we got, City Council is going to be the one executing.
That is correct. We have our board and city council approval process as well. The 150-day limitation period for the environmental reevaluation is separate from the FFGA review process.
So we're not even out of the FFGA review process with the FTA yet.
That is correct. I think the point was that the environmental reevaluation allows the FFGA review process to start.
Okay, but there's no limitation on how long the FTA has to do their FFGA, I guess, evaluation?
The congressional notification period is 30 days. I am not aware that the secretary's review period has a time limit.
I'm talking about the FTA has it now, right? Or has it moved to the secretary?
FFGA itself, the FTA has it.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So the FTA still has the FFGA
Yes.
proposed, and it's supposed to go through their review. Now, from there, it has to go to the secretary, and the secretary has 30 days for the review process, correct? So I guess what I'm saying is that as far as I know, I haven't heard a time limit for the, I guess, the FTA, whoever's doing it in the FTA, to give us a response on whether the FFGA is accepted. Is that correct?
Yes, Chair, I don't believe there's any time limit that they are required, they are bound by, but the last communications with FTA and our staff it's done. They had some questions, they wanted to update some of the financial tables in there, and Rick went back and forth with them this week, and they have no more questions.
Yes.
So is that separate from what we're now beginning, or is that part of this process?
It's part of the process.
It's part of the process.
Yes. So the most recent information I have from the FTA is that, and we've been working primarily with Region 9. So Region 9 will be prepared to forward it to headquarters right around now, if or in the very near future, and then it will be for a period of time in headquarters before it goes to the secretary, and then before it goes to Congress.
See, I thought we were at the headquarter position, so we're still at Region 9.
Yes.
From Region 9, we got to go to the FTA
Yes.
headquarters, Nurel Fernandez or whoever she has doing it, and then from there it goes to the secretary, which is Buttigieg, and then once Buttigieg approves, then it goes to the Congress, and you have a 30-day notification period. I don't see how that's going to be done by the end of the year. I just don't. I can't see it. There's no way it's going to be done by the end of the year. And just so the public knows, the recovery plan was accepted September of last year. So it's already September of this year. So we're already 1 year into this. It may take a minimum, in my opinion, another 6 months.
Mhm.
But do you have an estimate, Kathleen, as to how long it's going to take?
Yes. So, well, I have the estimate that we've been provided by the FTA.
Which
that there's-
FTA?
Region
9.
9.
Okay,
Region
what
9.
about FTA?
I'm sorry.
With all due respect to Region 9, they've been kind of off on all of their estimates so far. So what about FTA?
I have not had communication with FTA headquarters. FTA Region 9 is actually doing the drafting and finalization of the FFGA to move it on to headquarters. Their anticipated time frame is it will clear FTA headquarters this month. November, they're looking at the month of November for the secretary's review, and the month of December for congressional notification. So we are looking toward the end of December from their time period. And what that does mean is that there's going to, and it would be up to the board and city council whether they want to initiate the approval process concurrently before we have the final expiration of the congressional notification period, whether they are comfortable enough, that there won't be any changes made to start the approval process.
Well, I can tell you that since we don't know what it looks like, I can't see how the board can begin any process and with some assurance that, a document that says, this looks like it's going to be it. Until that, I can't even begin to think about how we're going to start. And that's not fair to the public, because a lot of times the documents that we receive are drafts and it's not given to the public to comment on. And so until we get a quote, a version that can be disseminated publicly, I don't think the board can take any action. And I don't think the city council will want to take any action as well.
Of course. And so concurrently, while the federal process is progressing, the Region 9 has said at some point before then, we will be able to have a draft. It'll be at a point where they feel like the draft has gone through enough federal review that they're pretty comfortable it's going to be in final form, which may be by the time it clears headquarters and goes to Congress. Generally, the content of the FFGA, and you may recall this from the first round, the content is pretty well prescribed by regulation and by FTA circular. So unusually so. So there's really generally not a whole lot of room for negotiation. It's, here's our form grant, here's our form FFGA, here are the amendments and the dollar amounts that we have agreed upon, and go ahead and approve and sign. And that's kind of my recollection from when we did the initial FFGA as well. So just to set expectations for the board, that's how the FTA is definitely looking at this.
Members, sorry. Anyone have any?
Chair, have a question. And I'm sure Hart has all this information documented. I think it would be very helpful, instead of just talking about the dates and stuff, maybe at the next meeting, we could have a sheet that shows the timeline of each of the items. You could call it things to do or stuff, and a status of each one of those items, whether the item pertains to things that needs to be done at the federal level or local level. I think that would clarify a lot of, our discussion. We have something that we could look at. And I'm sure you all have it in your office because you're keeping track of it, right? So not wanting to cause any work, but that's something you probably should have already. Thanks, Chair.
Sure.
Anyone else? Yes, Natalie. And then we'll go to the executive director.
Yeah, just for clarification, you mentioned the 30 days with the Secretary of Transportation and 30 days of congressional notice. That's all within the 150-day period you mentioned. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I'm sorry. That was directed at.
Lori answered.
Oh, Lori. Oh, you answered it. Sorry. Are you anything else, Natalie? Okay. Anyone else? If not now, Lori, please. You have your light on.
Chair, that was all I had for my executive update.
Oh,
But to
okay.
answer Robert's question, yes, we will provide that.
And
Anyone
I'm sorry.
else?
Oh.
No?
One thing, if I could add, is
Sure.
that we did apprise the FTA that we have a permitted interaction group. So we may be able to share that with the permitted interaction group at some point before it's shared with the full board.
Well, that's why the the time, because we haven't really we stood up the permitted interaction group when we thought initially that it was going to be a while, but then when we were represented to that this thing is really going to happen very quickly, we figured we don't need the pig because at that point we'll just take it before the full board. But that's why I'm so curious, or I want to know what the real time frame is, because to keep the board in the dark as to what's going on, we maybe need to do the pig. So that's why the timing to me is so critical for the board, as to whether at least to get some information so we're not caught off guard that we have the pig stood up or not. I mean, actually beginning to do and take in information. But right now, I don't even think there's information that you can give the pig, right, Lori?
That's correct, Chair. We don't even have the draft. FTA is controlling the draft. We have asked through Corporation Counsel to FTA Legal, can we at least have a draft that we could share with the pig? And so that's what Kathleen is referring to, that maybe we can get something in this time period to share so you folks can already start to review.
So just so the public is aware, until there's something for the pig, I don't think the pig's should do anything. so unless Corporation Council has something that they want to share to us, then you can let Dan know and then we can, because the pig is already formed. So. Thank you. Anything else?
Chair.
Yes.
I have a question. So, how does the time frame that you all just mentioned affects the bidding of the city center guideway and stations?
So I could give an update on that. Just, I know it's not on the agenda, but since you asked about it, we may.
I think we can do it. I think we can do it because it's, yeah. I think we can do that. So go ahead.
We are in procurement, so I'll be very cautious about what I can share. But so the first part of the procurement is supposed to be due in October. We're having some requests come in that there's a delay at the contracting board's level. So they will not. We will need an extension from October to possibly December, maybe even January. So I don't know if there's anyone on the HART board that I was hoping Joe O'Donnell will be here. He sits on that board, that maybe they can somehow help and expedite, because there's an influx of contractors wanting to help on Maui that are trying to get their license, which I understand is causing the delay. So I don't think this is going to have an impact because we're going to have to delay our procurement anyway.
Okay, so I guess the follow-up question would be, the procurement delay, it seems like it may be 3-4 months or whatnot. Does that affect the schedule of the completion?
Not at this point. We still feel we can finish the full project.
Am I still within the
2031.
rules? Okay,
Yes.
so sure. Okay, if you could estimate at what point do you, 3-4 months is not affecting the schedule. At what point do you think that we should be concerned about the schedule?
We can come up with that, but as of right now, we don't think it's going to affect the 2031 timeframe. But the procurement itself is possibly going to be delayed. We wanted to award it by summer of next year, but right now that might be delayed a few months.
Anyone
Thank you.
else?
That's it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any other? No? Okay, then thank you, Laura, for your update. Thank you, Kathleen. Okay. Okay, members, we're going to go to agenda item number 3, which are the committee reports. First of all, anyone in the audience who wishes to testify on agenda item number 3, anything through media, anything, social media, nothing. So we'll begin first with the September 1, 2023 meeting of the Government Affairs / Legal Matters Committee. Were you here, Anthony?
I was, yeah.
Okay.
I had COVID, but I did it virtually,
Remotely. That's right.
remotely. Chair, yes, your Government Affairs Legal Matters Committee met on September the 1st. We only had one item on our agenda, which most of the meeting was taken up by an executive session to consider the matter, and that matter now appears as agenda item number 8 on our agenda today. So that's my report.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. Any questions, members? Yes.
Chair. Yeah, so I attended that committee meeting as well, although I'm not a member, but I attended it. And just for the board's information, I did inquire during that committee meeting. My understanding was these types of matters that involve intent to acquire by eminent domain falls under the jurisdiction of the POC committee per our rules. And so I had inquired why this was agendized under this particular committee, which I'm not saying I object to it. I'm just saying that per our rules, this subject matter item should have been referred to the POC. So I'm not sure how the board wants to address that, but I just wanted to bring it to the board's attention. I think it's section 8.6C of our rules.
Anyone else? Did you have a comment, Robert? I believe that, and Dan can correct me if I'm wrong, is that technically, I think all the committees are a subset of this board. So the fact that the final action comes from this board is really what is critical as opposed to how it gets to us. Would you say that?
Yeah, I don't have a legal opinion on that, Chair, so it'd be a
Yeah.
internal process.
So I believe that we'll look into that, Kika, as to how they agendize these matters. But the bottom line is it ends up before this board, and we'll go into the discussion on when we get to item number 8. But as Anthony said, that was the only item on that. The GLAL. So I like to say glam, but it's not glam. It's glam.
It's pretty glamorous.
The glam committee meeting. Thank you, but Kika will take that up. Number 2 would be, or B would be the September 1, 2023 meeting of the Finance Committee. First of all, anyone here who has testimony on that? Hearing none. None. So with that, Robert, you.
Chair, thank you. Your Committee on Finance met on September 1st. We review and discuss the monthly and annual cash flow reports, and we got some we received financial updates. We also reviewed the first draft of the fiscal year 25 operating and capital budget. Unfortunately, I had to leave before the meeting was completed, and I talked to Vice Chair Edwin Young, and he mentioned to me that there were no other significant discussions related to the agenda items, and none of the agenda items requires board action, Chair. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions for Robert? Not? Okay, thank you very much. We're going to move to agenda item number 4, which is the follow-up on board members' requests made at the August 17, 2023 Board of Directors meeting. For example, anyone in the audience here to testify on agenda item number 4? Anyone virtually? I assume no. Cindy? No. Okay, so with that, and I guess this is really directed at you, Laurie. So as just for the anyone who is not familiar with this agenda item, there was a discussion among the board members that they wanted some way that when the board asks for follow-up information or more information, that it doesn't fall through the cracks, because we meet once a month. So we may forget what we asked for and so forth. So we decided that it would become an agenda item, and Cindy has been tasked with keeping tabs on exactly what was asked. And at the next meeting, the Hart staff is going to be asked to follow up or what the response is on the follow-up question. So the first one is the extension of the full funding grant agreement funds. I don't even remember who asked this, but I assume it's what's going to happen to the 744 million that we are still owed. Okay, Rick.
I think that question was actually from Michelle, and it related to the extension of the funds. We had mentioned that they were going to lapse at the end of this year, and we've been working with the FTA to get those extended. Her question was, is there any limit on the number of times it can be extended? And the answer is no, there isn't a limit. It's at the discretion of the FTA administrator based on circumstances. So the answer is no. Relative to our funds and the extension of our funds, we did have a conversation again with the FTA this week. They're still on track to extend the lapsing period for our funds. There is a bill going through Congress right now that has a provision that would cover that. So they don't want to get in front of that bill. They're monitoring that. They don't expect that that bill will move. So they are prepared to extend those funds. So that's the update on that comment.
So can you, off the top of your head, tell us how many times they've been extended?
I can't. because I know these funds date all the way back, to
Right.
2012. And I
Right.
know we haven't received any payments since 2017. So since 2017, I think they've been extended once. I know of maybe twice. Prior to that, I'm not sure if they were extended any.
Okay. Members, any questions on this agenda item number 4A? This is the extensions of the full funding grant agreement funds. Yes, Roger. Your mic.
Just a question of, I know that since we do have to give notice to Congress, is there any risk of these funds being clawed back by Congress? They're very interested in clawing back money these days. So
I have not heard anything about that. So I've not been given any indication. In fact, Senator Schott's office is also engaged in working with the FDA to make sure these get extended, and they have not raised that issue with us either.
Anyone else? Any questions on this? I'm sorry Michelle isn't here, or she could tell you whether you answered her question or not, but I think you did. The next item is item number 4B, claims arising from the October 7, 2023 City Center Utilities Relocation Gas Line Break. Anyone here to speak to this item?
I will, Chair. As far
No,
as
no, I mean anyone in the audience, sorry.
sorry.
Any, so, okay, none. So please proceed, Lori.
Oh, sorry, Chair. Yeah, as far as we know, there has been no claims filed on that gas line break. Hawaii Gas has been very responsive. Within an hour, they have that gas line back up and running. So don't believe there's any claims being filed right now.
But it was our contractor that broke the line because it was properly, but none of those things are properly noted anyway. So anyway, anyone else? Any member? Robert.
Quick question, Lori. What is the time frame that someone could file a claim?
Sure.
Because it just happened last month, so
Probably 2 years. 2 years.
2 years. Okay, so we'll keep this on the agenda for 2 years. No.
I think it would be qualified as a regular tort because they're not covered under an agreements with us. So I think it's 2 years. But anyway, any comments on that, attorney? Okay, Kathleen, any comments? Okay. All right. Anyone else on this particular item? Okay. So just to get a temperature check. So among the board members, is this sort of what you had in mind when we said we would have these follow-up questions? So some of us probably even forgot that these questions were being asked. So this is why this was done. I think it was Michelle's request too. Yes? Okay, so we'll continue to do this until somebody says we don't want to hear it anymore. Okay, with that, thank you very much. We're going to do agenda item number 5, which is update on recovery plan / financial plan versus current projections. Anyone offering testimony on this item in the public? Online? Nope. Okay. So I think this is going to be you, Rick.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so on this, this came up the last board meeting, and some of the information that I have here for you was discussed at the last Finance Committee meeting, which would have been 6 weeks ago. But the question came up primarily on that ending cash balance that we're forecasting through the end of the project, and why it is higher than what we presented in the recovery plan. So I have 2 pages here to review with you. The first page is on the funding side, the GET-TAT funding compared to the recovery plan. And this is the information that I shared with the Finance Committee, like I said, about 6 weeks ago. Nothing has changed at all to this. We haven't received any funds subsequent to that meeting. So this is a summary starting in June 22, the month that the recovery plan was submitted, through the most recent quarterly receipts of GET and TAT. And to date, we have had a positive variance in each of them, 28 million on the GET side, 14 on TAT, and then 5.7 on the city TAT, for a total of a $48 million positive variance on our funding since the recovery plan submission.
So, Rick, I think if I remember correctly, the recovery plan was projected at about 120 something million at the end. When we did the recovery.
In terms of total cash,
Right.
yes, that's correct.
Right. So now we're at 580 around
Right.
there.
Yeah, so if
correct?
you go to the next page, Cindy. Yeah, these are the items that come up to the cash forecast. Now, granted, the forecast changes regularly. The forecast that will be presented at the next finance committee actually shows instead of 580, I think it's around 590. So we do continue to have some things that change that impact that balance. But these are the reconciling items approximately for the variance. So per the recovery plan, we anticipated $120 million cash surplus at the end of the project in 2031. I have here a second line, favorable GET and TAT variance. I put 60, and the page before this had 48. The reason is the 48 is the actuals through September. But if you'll recall, we had this discussion some time ago. The timing on when the city TAT started was about 6 months earlier than we expected it to be. And there's about a $10 million impact I'm estimating to come through because that timing shifted up. The time frame on when the project's portion of those taxes it'll increase from 33% to 50%. The timing on that difference also accelerated. So that's where the additional favorable variance is going to come in. So I'm anticipating right now about $60 million favorable variance in the near term on GET and TAT. We've talked about this before too. We have lower forecasted interest expense on debt, roughly in the neighborhood of $220 million. That's because of two things. It's because of a reduction in the estimated level of borrowings that we will have to do. And it's also related to the assumption of using tax-exempt commercial paper as possible to reduce the borrowings of bonds. So that results in about an estimated $220 million positive variance. We did, per chair's request in the last forecast that we presented 2 weeks ago, included forecasted bond premiums, and that was estimated based on the percentage premium that was recognized on the 23D issuance that just recently took place. So that issuance generated about 12 million in premiums, and then we added about 60 million to the forecast. So I have roughly around 70 million impact from bond premiums. Then there's additional federal funding that we've received or are frankly in the process of receiving. There's two items here. The Consolidated Appropriations Act is roughly 65 million. It's 64,750,000. That was the funds that were approved at the end of 2022 in a congressional appropriations bill. We are still in the process of actually receiving those funds. We have submitted all the necessary information to the FTA, and it's in the process of approval. So we're anticipating getting that sometime within the next couple of months. We are at the end of the federal fiscal year, so that may have an impact on the actual funding, but we are anticipating those soon. The other item is a new item, the FHWA Flex Funds. And this is something that's been in discussion for several months. We haven't talked about it because we didn't know whether it was going to happen or not. And we didn't include it in our forecast. But the next forecast you see at the next Finance Committee will include this 30 million. These are funds that have been discussed amongst DOT Director Sniffen, Director Morton, and Lori, and the FTA. These are funds that are being transferred basically from the highway funds from HDOT to HART. Those funds were at risk of lapsing, and that's why they were trying to transfer them over to us to avoid the lapse. They are scheduled to lapse at the end of September. The FTA and we thought the lapsing period was next year. So that's why we were waiting until we had more certainty about them before we added it. But we got a call from the FTA a couple of weeks ago and said, hey, we were mistaken. These funds actually are going to lapse at the end of this September. So you need to go ahead and get everything submitted so that we can get this obligated. So both of those, the 65 million and the 30 million, The documentation for those has been submitted. It is in process. The FDA has confirmed that they have it. They don't have any questions on it. So they're working to get both of those obligated before the end of September. So we should get approximately $95 million in funding sometime within the next few months. And then finally, we didn't include in the recovery plan miscellaneous income. So that is a difference as we actually receive it. We receive interest income on the cash that we have sitting at the city's cash account. We receive periodically some miscellaneous rental income from some of the properties that we take possession of, but the tenants are still in it. So I put approximately 15 million of those miscellaneous income items. And that brings us up to the current estimated cash surplus at the end of the project of around 580 million, substantially higher than the surplus that we expected when we submitted the recovery plan.
Are you done?
Yes.
Okay, any questions, Robert? And then followed by Roger.
Okay, thanks, Rick, for the presentation. Two questions. One is, I know the finance.
Welcome, Director Sniffen. No problem. Thank you very much. So let's reflect his presence. Thank you
I
very
know the
much.
financial plan, we're forecasting a certain interest rate percentage, and this is where we got our savings. Instead of using general obligation, well, TECP is also a part of general obligation bonds. You're not issuing general obligation bonds. You're using TECPs. Have you looked at, because of the current interest environment, have you looked at your projection on interest costs for the project until 2031, or you just taking the position that you're maintaining whatever the interest environment is today?
When the city issues bonds, they issue it at a coupon rate of 5%. That's been consistent. That will probably continue in the future. So in our forecast, we've used a 5% rate, and the forecast that we have does go through the end of the project.
Yeah.
The premium comes into play, and the reason it's hard to forecast the premium because that comes into play because of the delta between the current market rates and that 5%.
Absolutely.
So
Yes.
we have estimated the premiums, but the 5% is what is currently paid on the city's bonds. That's been a constant for several years now. So we've used that assumption in the forecast going forward.
Yeah, understand that the difference between what you get as premium and the coupon rate, which is 5%, will change depending on what the market will bear, right? I'm really talking about TECPs, right? Because those
TECP
rates
does fluctuate.
are variable.
Yeah, we're using a 3% rate on the TECP, which is a little higher than the actual current rate.
What
But
is
that
the
was
current
based on a
rate now?
recommendation by Bank of America.
What is the current rate now?
It's 2 something, so it's not too different than the current rate.
Okay.
It has come up. It was a lot cheaper than that. It has raised some.
Okay. One last thing, with the flex funds, the federal highway flex funds, what's the process for HART to accept those funds? Is it just DOT is giving it to you and you say thank you, or does it have to go through a legislative process at the state and the city level?
Well, someone else could probably answer that better than me.
I was going to ask somewhat similar, maybe Brent could help too. I think we are processing a grant for the 65 million right now.
Correct.
I have not seen the 30.
It has been submitted also. And we just brought this up. We hadn't talked
Yeah.
about this in the past relative to our forecast because we were waiting until there was some more certainty around it. But we did hear from the FDA recently, I'm sure you did too, that those
Right.
funds were going to lapse at the end of September. So Roger, we did submit the documentation on the 30 also. So both of those have been submitted. The FDA has submissions
I
for
think
both.
that we have to process that grant at
I thought
DTS,
you
right?
did. I thought that you
I
guys.
saw 65. I'm not sure we did the 30. Maybe I missed it, but
All right. Yes, DTS did submit. Mark Au had submitted the 30. Then it had to go to, I believe, the Division of Labor, and then
they
to the
have
FDA.
like 30 days or 15 days, I think, to do it because that gets really tight with
Yeah.
getting all the subsidiary people that have to sign off
Right.
on
And
the
we
grant.
have reached out to all of them. OMPO's aware.
Okay.
So it sounds like it's on track. The FDA has confirmed to us they think it's on track and they're hoping to get it obligated.
And do we need to have a policy board approval of that? Or? Because I don't think it's gone before the
think so.
policy board.
I
No.
don't think it has to go through because the funding went directly from federal highways to FTA. It was a direct transfer. For FTA, they were under the impression that the funds would not lapse this
Right.
year, which is why they weren't pushing it that hard.
Right.
But once they found out in their rules that it was going to lapse, they started pushing things very, very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. So we got the call a couple of weeks ago saying, we've been working on this, but you guys need to submit. So we did right away through your guys.
Okay. And I have one other question, Chair.
Yes, please.
In talking about the forecast cash surplus, I think it's important for all of us to remember that the definition of the surplus is the expected revenue minus the expected expense. And while I commend you guys for updating on a monthly basis the revenue side, and we're doing really good, I think the estimate on cost upon completion is probably a 2-year-old number. And is there any comment there about of whether or not this 580 surplus is at any risk of because of the recent inflation and construction?
We do continue to look at that too, and if Nate wants to add something, he certainly can. But the project cost is unchanged from what was submitted in the recovery plan. We review that on a regular basis. We review and stay on top of the progress of the contractors. There are certainly risks that we track, but we have baked inflation estimates into those numbers also. That was a big part of the conversation and the review that we had going on during the recovery plan process. So right now, we're still firm on the number that we submitted in the recovery plan on the cost side.
But you just had a risk refresh just recently, right? And as part of the process, whoever's doing it would take a look at the risk associated with the last major contract, and also whether the pricing is reasonable or not, correct?
Yes.
And it hasn't changed. So I guess based on your risk refresh, you all decided that everything is exactly the same.
So we did increase a lot of those inflationary risks and some of the resource concerns, especially around electrical equipment because of what's going on. If we are successful, our project budget will be $9.1 billion until 2031. We are performing better than anticipated when it comes to contingency if you compare it against the recovery plan. But it all hinges around that award of CCGS, right? I think it would be premature now to say we are in better shape than we thought 2 years ago, although we're trending that way until we award CCGS. That could be plus or minus 500 million and make or break it.
Anyone else? Yes, Natalie.
Thank you. This didn't hit me till just now. I'm looking at this and we're talking about September 23 and we're in September 23 and you're talking about actuals. So would you please refresh our memory when you actually got the GET and
That would have been received in September. I think it's.
So what was the date? Do you remember?
I don't remember the date.
Okay.
It's usually 2 months after the end of the quarter, so sometime probably in August. I think we received it in August. Now, this is the one, it does say actual, but this is one I was talking about the other day that the state did hold back a portion of it. I included the full amount because that's what we will be getting. So on that September one, I think it was actually received in August, but as of September, that includes a portion of that was held back by the state that we'll be getting in October.
So I think in the future when you present things like this, it might be good to just kind of put a little asterisk that it doesn't include, that portion or
I
whatever.
can do that, but all of these are forecast. So.
But you're saying these are actual here.
Okay. Point taken, but it's a very small part
Yeah,
of it.
no, I understand.
Yeah.
Just because sometimes we look back at our stuff and then we're like, or I do anyway, have questions and try to.
I'll more clearly indicate that. You're welcome. Thank you.
Anthony?
Sure, thanks. Notwithstanding what Nate has just said about how the contract for the city centre guideway could vary from our budgeted amount by as much as $500 million, with the sort of receipts that we're getting from the GET and the TAT, it seems fairly clear that there's a strong possibility that we will have a sufficient surplus to at least build the guideway as far as Kaka'ako, possibly as far as Ala Moana. And so my question is, how do we start planning for that at the same time as getting on with the FFGA section. If we're going to have the money, then we ought to be able to start planning to spend it so we can get to Ala Moana. I'm wondering how you do that.
Try your pig.
You know, the first of looking for Kathleen, you know, the first of it is making sure we don't preclude it in our CCGS procurement, and also enable it by including that option we talked about. We are committed to including an option to Ala Moana. I think that's as detailed as I should get into in public session, but there will be an option that gets us to Ala Moana in that CCGS procurement. That's our initial step. But before you do the guideway and the stations, you obviously have to relocate utilities. Those utility plans through Kaka'ako and Ala Moana area, they've already been designed and they've already been approved through all the city departments. It's been over a year though, so they'll need to be refreshed. So the first thing, you know, that we would do, exclusive of what I talked about on CCGS, would be go through, reroute those plans for signatures, get HECO to finish their electrical design, and then probably go out for procurement with that. The industry doesn't want to come here, you know, the big design builders to relocate utilities. We've proven that we are best equipped to relocate those utilities. So we'd probably get ahead of them and try to do exactly what we're doing on Dillingham and downtown, relocate those utilities.
And when would we need to start moving on that utility relocation on the assumption that the CCGS contract could include the Ala Moana section so that portion is not delayed?
So my understanding is HECO has never stopped their design update in that area. So they're continuing to do that. I think we need to start very soon on those. If I recall, those areas have the least amount of utilities. I want to say it was somewhere in like the $75 million range compared to Dillingham. It's 500 and downtown it's 200. So I would guess it's about 18 months worth of work to relocate those utilities. And so in the next year, I would say we need to start refreshing those because the design builder is going to come on board mid to late next year. It's going to be a year design. We would have to have them focus on the FFGA scope first. And essentially it would be when those big gantry cranes are done with the FFGA segment, we would want to just immediately demob and remob them to the Ala Moana segment for cost efficiency. And that would happen sometime in year 3 probably of that design build contract.
In terms of board action to release funds to pay for that utility relocation, what kind of time frame are you looking at us to be able to authorize you to go ahead with that?
I would think 18 months for construction, 6 months for procurement, maybe 6 months for a design refresh. So we're looking at probably 2.5 years from the point of go until we're complete with utility relocations. So we're probably within the 6 month to a year time frame that we need to start on those if we want that option to work.
So you're going to be looking for $75 million that isn't part of the FFGA budget. Am I right?
The first part would be to finish the design. So I would call it a relative Manini budget to spend some design effort, just reshopping those, getting those reapproved. And then obviously before we go out for procurement, it would be authorizing $75 million.
So the board would have to have a mechanism where we could identify funds that aren't specifically tagged to the FFGA spending. Is that correct?
Yes, which is most of the money.
Right.
And I would add that we would need to work with the FTA very closely on that too, because all of the funding sources that we have are in the recovery plan, and that's what they based on. So despite the fact that we know we're tracking well ahead of that and we're going to have surplus, we have to get approval from the FTA before we can use any of those funding sources for anything beyond Civic Center. And I think we will have a really good chance of making that argument once we get, one of the key things coming up is the procurement for CCGS. Once we get that, see how that aligns with our budget, that'll kind of affirm our estimates on the cash forecast. Then we can, I think, seek approval from them to release the money in conjunction with talking to the board about it.
Well, I kind of disagree with you because what the big unknown is, when is the FFGA going to be approved, right? The FFGA is going to be approved with a truncated system. It's our understanding that when that is approved, all the federal funds are to the end of Kakako, not Kakako, but Civic Center. That's where it ends. So it would seem to me that anything after that, and it would be a matter of, and you guys have been playing with a very interesting way of what is the Act One money, right, Robert, as to what you can use for administrative costs. And so that language is found in the 2015 GET extension as well. But having said that, there is that money. I mean, that's what you've been using to justify the use of the GET for operations and maintenance, and as well as administrative costs up until this point, which I personally think that that's not right. So back to what Anthony is saying, once that full funding grant agreement is approved, it would seem that everything after that is quote state money or our money, the HART money, and doesn't require their approval, FDA's approval, because I thought they're like hands off after the FFGA is approved and Kaka'ako is the truncated in. Civic Center is truncated in. Is that true or not?
My understanding is they're not going to be hands off at all.
Well, shouldn't they pay then?
What's that?
Shouldn't they pay if they're not going to be hands off?
Well, they're paying the 744.
Well, but but under the
Right.
FFGA, that's to Civic Center.
Correct. And everything that we submitted in the recovery plan was to Civic Center, and it included all of these funding sources. Well, it didn't include the 65 and the 30 that's in this example, but the categories of funding sources were all in the recovery plan.
Except that the board disagreed with you on a lot of how you estimated, including commercial paper. And the other thing I was going to bring up is the other thing we disagreed with you on is your estimate on GET. So I noticed that your favorable GET TAT actuals to 923 plus timing on the Wahoo TAT, and you are right. We are 6 months ahead on that because the board took the initiative on getting the TAT passed. Having said that, though, what is missing, unless you can tell me otherwise, is we disagreed with you on your estimate on the GET. We accepted your 5.8, and if you look at the legislative this committee reports on Act One estimated a 3% GET growth. You estimated a 5.8%. I believe the board believed that it was higher, but we said okay, but we did know that we think your GET estimates are wrong. So if we are to look at that and put that in, you have a different but projected.
Sure.
Because these are all
if you
forecasts.
raise the expected growth rate on the it would be significantly higher than this.
Right, and,
Sure.
and that's one of the things that I did expect to have included in this that wasn't, is what do you think the way the GET is going?
Well, right now we haven't changed any of the forward forecast.
Exactly.
It is
and,
what
and I think you should change, we want to know what your projected forward forecast is, because we disagreed with you anyway when you did the recovery plan. So we want to know what it is. Well, I want to know. So the next time I'd like to have
okay.
an
I don't
update.
have any basis for changing it other than, if you tell me your gut feeling is it's going to be higher, that's fine. If you want me to
Except
change
our
it, we
gut
can
feeling
change
has
it.
been right, Rick, and yours been wrong. So I want to know what it is that you think it will change
I
to.
wouldn't change it myself, but if you guys direct us to change it, we will.
So you don't think consulting with what's his name at the state budget and finance? What's his name?
Seth?
Lewis? Yeah.
No.
He's the director.
Well, but who's the other guy who does the GT?
Seth Colby.
Is that Calvert?
I think DBED would be probably a
The better one.
better source.
Maybe talk to Dane then.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dane.
So we'll look at that and we'll find out what it is that it would be, and then we'll ask you to recompute, because
Okay.
I think 5.8 is way too low.
Yeah.
Especially even with the recovery from COVID. We kept pretty constant. We didn't have to go out for bond financing. What were we, 13 point something percent this last time? Do you remember, Robert? GET, 13 point something percent?
Yeah, I don't know about the last quarter, but yeah, in one of the quarters, yes.
But it's way more than 5.8.
The Japanese market still hasn't come back.
No. They're coming back slowly though.
Slow.
Yeah. But you're right. They haven't come back yet at all. But so those are the things. So the next things to do is I noticed that it's actuals through 9/23, fine. But I think for us to get a better feel, because everything is forecasted, right? The basic GET, TAT, that is the base of this is a forecast.
That's
What
correct.
you thought it was going to grow. So if anything's been proven is that it's wrong or it's too conservative. So let's see what it could be. I'm not saying we're going to rely on it, but what it could be, because we went from 120 something million to 580 already. Okay,
So,
anything?
Chair,
Yes.
just a couple comments. Yes, DBED would be a good source for y'all to go to. Other than the director and deputy director level, or at the director and deputy director level, Eugene Tien, he's the state economist, so he may be able to offer some feedback on what his forward-looking thing is with GET and TAT. And I know the Council on Revenue meets, and they determine or they set a projection for tax collections, and that is used by the state legislature for their annual biennium budget. So anyway, there are sources to go to get some of that information. Now, I do have a comment. I know we've been talking about Ala Moana quite a bit, and even though that's not going to be part of the FFGA, one of the things with respect to Ala Moana is instead of just talking about it, maybe one of these meetings, whether it's at a board meeting or as part of the PIG, maybe we could put together some kind of business plan from Civic Center to Ala Moana, and not just construction costs, but also potential revenue. And how do you go about getting the revenue? We have $580 million. Don't know whether that's enough, right? It seems like it's a lot of money, and it seems like Hart always use more money than we estimate. So a business plan would be good with respect to going to Ala Moana. So just my comments.
Do you want it as follow-up?
Is it more appropriate for that to be discussed in the board meeting or in a PIG? Then we'll present it to the board and the public.
My only comment on that is that the PIG is going to be looking at extensions beyond Ala Moana, and we're allowed to make one report. So if we have to come back with a report on the extension to Ala Moana, then the PIG has to dissolve and be reconstituted. So I'm not sure if the PIG is necessarily the best mechanism.
Okay.
That is true. And that's why I was going to say the problem is that if it goes through the PIG, it really can't come out
Oh,
unless
okay.
we co-agendize it. I guess we could.
I mean, to my mind, the most important thing is for the administration to be aware of the fact that there's a strong possibility that we're going to have the funds to at least get to Kakawako, if not to Ala Moana. And so somehow or other, you need to be building that into your planning. It sounds like that's what you're doing, Nate, in the sense that you're putting together, as I understand it, in the RFP, there'll be an element that will allow whoever's bidding to bid on that extension from Civic Center to Ala Moana. But we do need some sort of mechanism where the board can follow up on that, and I'm not sure what that is, Chair.
Yeah, I think it is true that the PIG may not be the best mechanism. That doesn't mean that I think whatever the PIG gets from here, the PIG gets, but it can't go the opposite way. So, why don't you get it to the board? And if the PIG wants more detail, then you guys can take it up. PIG.
Okay.
Yes, Natalie.
Thank you. So with respect to some of the comments on the GET projected increases and being over what we've forecast, I think a lot of that has to do with inflation, and we need to keep that in mind. And so when you do this, put together these new projections, if you would make it very clear on there that that's what that is, that it's not anything from the recovery plan or that we've looked at before, I think that would be very helpful for us. But I also had another question. So as I recall, when the FTA gave their approval on the recovery plan last September, they had a couple contingencies on releasing the funds anyway, and one of them was the contract for the city center guideway and stations, because they wanted to see what the actual costs were when that contract is awarded. So with respect to what we're talking about on the amended FFGA, I guess I wanted to be clear that those two issues are separate, that the issuance of the FFG, the City Center Guideway Stations contract, is only with respect to the releasing of the funds and not with respect to the amendment of the FFGA. Is that correct?
So the amendment of the FFGA releases the first $125 million. The award of CCGS releases the next 250, and then in the FFGA draft, they've put other milestones to release the remaining funds. What we're talking about here, so even though there's this $580 million surplus estimate, Chair, we have argued with FTA. We feel anything above and beyond what's in the recovery plan is for us to use if we want to go to Ala Moana and beyond. And they have pushed back, says you are using projections, and I know you disagreed with our estimate, and there was no way we were going to get the recovery plan approved if we went above the 5%. So they actually wanted it lower. We had to have Dr. Seth Colby write a letter for us. But they feel like this is a projection to the end. GET can go up and down, up and down. We agree with you. But trying to get FTA to say that all of these funds is ours, it's very difficult until I think once we get CCGS awarded, then they'll have more comfort that, okay, now you have some surplus that we can use for past Kaka'ako. Sorry, did I answer your question? Sorry.
Can I add? And
Okay.
I think, I think they are, the award of CCGS is not dependent on executing the FFGA. And that's a key point.
Sorry, to clarify.
And that's a key point. So they're marching forward concurrently. And, to be very realistic, as Lori said, the conversations that we need to have with the FTA and continue to have them is, can we use that surplus to spread it past Civic Center, right? And I think they just don't have the confidence in projections yet, simply because everything in the world since the recovery plan has lent itself to increased costs, right? Inflation, resource constraints, and then the tragedy that we have next door, all that does is put more resource constraints on them. So I think the FTA needs some confidence over the next year that projections continue to grow, and then if we get a solid bids from the industry and we can award that thing, I do think that's the milestone that says, all right, let's talk.
I don't necessarily disagree with what you're saying. Matter of fact, I do agree with you. I think what Anthony is looking at, as well as certain members of the board, probably me included, is that, at some point you can't just wait. You have to go ahead. I don't think there's anything that prohibits the board from planning. The board wants to plan. What the board needs to do, however, what the PIG's going to have to do is get a good handle of what they anticipate will be the funds. I understand what the FTA may say or may think as to what their control over those funds may or may not be. But at some point, it's like, hey, if that's all we have, because that's all we have, then that's all we have. So it would seem like whatever we had in the recovery plan projection at $120 million surplus at the end, that's what they relied on when they approved the recovery plan. So anything else, like our disagreement with you guys as to what the GET growth is going to be, what the TAT growth is going to be, and so forth, and the city TAT comes in too, then that's separate and apart. And that's a battle that you're going to have to be willing to make with DC, is to tell them, you can't have it both ways. And those battles can be done. So that anyway, that's what I think. So I think that it is true. I understand what you're saying. I agree with you, Nate. I agree with you. And I think CCGS is critical. But once it's issued, it's a contract. And in our contract, though to my dismay, a lot of times you have these nice little contingencies and so forth and so on. So it's anticipated what we think we're going to have. But at the end of that recovery plan projection, or whatever you may agree to with the CCGS contract, is what we agree to with the CCGS contract and what we have. accordingly. So no, I agree, but that doesn't prohibit the pig from making assumptions or asking you for what the assumptions are, and we move forward from that.
And I think, you know, the initial step is probably a $2 million ask for professional services design support to refresh those designs. You know, I think that's a 6-month effort with a design squad to go through, review them, ask the city departments to re-review, get them updated, oversee HECO finishing their design. So it's a smaller ask up front to just get us ready to then need that 75 million or so to hit the streets with it.
Yes.
Thanks, Chair. So, I just want to make sure, because I think I've been asking for some time now for, and I know that you folks are working on it, a financial plan from to Ala Moana, but then from Ala Moana, I'm sorry, from Civic Center to Ala Moana. So I'm not sure if that would satisfy Robert's request. I'm not sure if Robert's looking for something a little bit more in a business plan, but I think a financial plan from Civic Center to Ala Moana is a start. I think what we're looking for, well, what I was looking for when I was asking for that was just financially, what are we anticipating from Civic to Ala Moana from a cost standpoint and from a revenue, required revenue standpoint, and as a starting point. So I'm not sure if, Robert, if that's something that would satisfy what you're requesting, just so that we're not double, we're not doing, we're not asking for more than.
Yeah, I mean, the financial plan is a part of it, right? Within the financial plan, and if you're projecting a certain amount of revenue coming in, how do you go about getting it? And that would be a strategy and approach that you would have to identify in your plan, right? So yes,
I think that was kind of the line that I was trying to track was, let's figure out where we would be at and what we're chasing.
Yeah.
And then the next step would be trying to figure out how to get there.
Right. Even things as simple as, I know we use a lot of outside consultants, for this part of the project. Since now we have a lot of knowledge, institutional knowledge on how to build this, is the approach to continue to use the same number of outside consultants, or is the approach that, well, maybe we should look for local experts that may be able to, that should be able to do the project instead of relying on outside consultants. So, I don't know, but those are the things that Hart has to think about and put it in a plan with respect to how do we get there and what kind of resources do we need? How do we get the resources? All those things.
This is sort of tangentially related, and I guess it would be a request to add an item to the next agenda because it's not agendized now. But Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, I participated in a workshop on bus rail integration that was put on by Roger and his people. It was very, very useful and very interesting. One of the things that was clear that came out of that is that a lot of the bus connections for the truncated system are going to be happening at the downtown station by Aloha Tower, not at the Civic Center. And the renderings at the moment for the station there are pretty ugly. If we built the station that's rendered at the moment, there'd be demands to publicly execute the Hart board, I think. My point is that we should be treating that area, as long as we're doing planning for a truncated system, we need to treat that area as sort of our Grand Central Station. I suspect we need a design competition, something like that. And I don't know how we get that on the agenda, which committee it goes through, but it's clearly an issue that we need to deal with.
Roger, do you feel that that's operations and maintenance, or is that the initial plan?
Well, I agree that when you look at the connections at the downtown station on Ala Moana are much better for many connections because of they're already on the street. A large part of our system, riders would be headed toward Waikiki, and so there would be connections at both, but there would be significant connections at downtown. Everybody knows my preference for trying to figure out a way that the city could acquire the Dillingham building and integrate it into the design of the thing. That's a pipe dream at this point. I don't think it would be unobtainable. The price is probably not as much as people think. The big cost would be renovating a 100-year-old historical transportation building into our Grand Central Station, as Anthony has alluded to. We do have, I know that Hart has substantial issues involved with the downtown station and trying to figure out how to integrate it into the city space. The current landowner wants walls and blockages, and the other side of the street is currently a shut down utility. So yeah, there's all kinds of opportunities in the future, but those are long-term opportunities. I don't, that's my view. I am interested at a low level of whether we could make this happen through federal funding, which does allow the restoration of historical transportation buildings as an eligible cost. That would be a city issue, not a Hart issue, in my view.
Okay, yes.
Can I
Nate.
just add? So I'm not sure that you guys review the most recent renderings of the downtown station or the plan. I don't know who attended on behalf of Hart or if anybody did, but those kind of meetings and that discussion very much excites myself and the Hart staff. So we would love to be present in those. And we've actually spent a lot of time changing what those station footprints look like. And so just, maybe we can regroup and make sure we were looking at the most recent rendering. And then I do want to any decisions that we are going to make or discussions that would impact the design of a station, all those need to be decided on over the next 6 to 8 months as we're nearing the final phase of that procurement. So just keeping everybody in mind. So if there's products that come out of that meeting or continued meetings, you got to just funnel them to us, and so we can start to incorporate those in the bid docs.
And of course, the owner of the highway is right beside me.
Yeah.
The Ala Moana Boulevard, it would be impacted by the station a lot, and the connections to the bus also would be impacting that. So, we're hopeful, and we've had very informal discussions with Ed over, some things like bus pullouts and things like that. But it would become. It was always planned that it would be, even during the full build out to Ala Moana, downtown was always the second most busy station. And it might actually be even more intense now if, in fact, we don't have Ala Moana, which was projected to be the busiest station.
Roger, for those of us who grew up basically like me from Waianae, so Dillingham Transportation Building means different things to us. So like there's the one in Ivalea, and Dillingham Transportation, as a lawyer, is the one across from, part of Grosvenor Center. So for the people out there, when you're talking about integrating the Dillingham Transportation Building, which one are you talking about?
I'm talking about the one that borders Queen Street, Alakea, and Bishop. And that's part of the Grosvenor Center.
It's at the Grosvenor Center complex.
Right. And when you think of it, downtown is hollowing out a little bit in terms of vacancies are up. Office space is there's lots of it available. It's not there. And between Hart and DTS and AMPO, we spend a lot on rent.
So are you volunteering to move there? Is that what you're doing? I mean,
I don't have.
Because you're paying rent.
I can't give you. I'm volunteering to continue to be interested in the opportunities that it would present. I recognize that it is a long way, and whether or not there was sufficient interest on the part of the city, I can't say. But it certainly is something that, at a low level, we've had discussions among ourselves and the administration at the city. But there's been no commitment at all, and
With all due respect to you and Ed, I mean, the problem is government moves very slowly. So from what Nate said, you
Right.
guys gotta kind of step it up.
it
If
would
we're
not be.
gonna do
it-
anything about this.
we would not be in a position in 6 to 8 months to have that. That's as you say, government moves very slowly. It requires us to prioritize where we spend our transportation money, and there's only so much of it.
Yes.
This may not necessarily fall directly under the board's purview, but maybe more TOD. But it might be interesting to note if anybody's taking a look at, downtown, they're looking at developing a lot of hotels and different types of living quarters, mixed use development in downtown area. That with the airport connectivity, I don't know if anybody's ever taken a look at projections down the road for potential visitor traffic in downtown area and even increased residential.
Yes.
Mayor,
Edward.
Chair, I'm just following up on Roger's comments. Dillingham Building is one of the most expensive goals. I think there are many cheaper alternatives. Ala Park, the old railroad station across the street around Derelict, and then the Hawaii Community Foundation is right behind the Dillingham Building. And then you have the open parking lot at the Aloha Tower, assuming that Hawaii Pacific University is willing to give it up. So I think those are other sites will be less expensive for a major transit center.
Dan Gluck has informed me that we're slightly off topic here. Just
Chair-
slightly.
So to go back to where I originally, because I did point out this obviously is not
Right.
agendized,
Right.
but what Nate has said about how the design work needs to be completed in 6 to 8 months so that we can let out the CCGS contract. To me, this is now an urgent issue. I'm happy to hear that there may be new renderings, because the renderings I saw really, I mean, I was joking that there would be calls for our public execution, but I don't think it's that far off. I mean, the renderings I saw were incredibly ugly. And this is going to be a spot, I mean, in a way, it'll be a gateway to the city. Even if you're driving in from, if people are coming along Nimitz, that will seem like a gateway if they're on their way to Waikiki. And we have to get it right. And what I've seen so far, we are not getting it right. And
So I
so
guess-
that is a priority. I don't know how we get it on the agenda, how we follow up, how the board works with the administration on this, but we
I
need to
think-
take care of it.
I think that's the problem. We have clearly, I think, a sentiment among the board that we need to look at this, but this is not the time. So let me ask Dan. Dan, if we called a special meeting on this specific topic and asked everyone to show up, wouldn't that be the simplest way for us to do it? And we could do it as, with 6 days' notice. So I propose, if it's okay, since we have a lot of the major players here, and this is you, Anthony, is that we find a mutually convenient time and we call a special board meeting for this topic. And you don't have to be prepared. I mean, just as long as you can have this meeting and we can facilitate a meeting and members of the board can participate on this. And let's call it a full board meeting versus a POC, finance, and we just have a special board meeting. Is that something you guys would be agreeable to?
Absolutely. And just to be clear on the scope of the meeting, it's for the transportation center and the extension to Ala Moana. Is that the discussion?
What would you like?
Well, I'm particularly concerned about the downtown station, because that's going to continue to be busy even when we get to Ala Moana, right? As you know, I assume we will get to Ala Moana, but it is going to be one of the two most important stations, and it's going to be the single most visible one.
So why don't we do this? I'll leave it up to our our legal eagle here so that it's broad enough so that we can talk
Yeah.
about all of these things. So I'm not saying, hey, time out, time out. So let's do it that way. And we'll try to at least preliminarily check your schedules so that, you guys are available. Yes, Roger.
Yeah, just on that, my schedule, I will be out of town October 4th to the 11th.
And one other thing, Chair, could we do everything we could to encourage HECO to show up and share their plans for their power plant across the station there?
Oh yeah, we can ask them.
Because as I understand it, they have made some progress and they do have some renderings of their own, and it would be nice to know how that might fit in with our plans.
We can ask.
Have
They
made
may be a
their-
little busy now.
Anthony, I'm not sure where they are in their own procurement, so they might not be able to. They've been talking to us. Well, one of the potential bidders has been talking to us and sharing their renderings with us, but I don't know if they're done with their procurement.
You mean for the substation? Yeah, but they can just tell us that they're gonna, put the substation property out to bid or whatever else, so that at least we know where we are. I think that's all you need to know, right,
Well, the
Anthony?
point is they do have some renderings of what they'd like to do there, and given that we have to try to integrate that space, it would be nice for the public at large to see them if we can. I understand we can't tell HECO what to do, but we could ask them nicely.
I think HECO's a lot more cooperative nowadays. So
You've been beating them up, Chair. That's all.
I wish
Can
I
just
shouldn't
add
say it
one-
that way. Yes.
One more constraint possibly is I think if we review any renderings, it would need to be before we release part 2. Like, which would be, before the end of the year, because I believe, and Dan, maybe you can check this, that once we release part 2, it becomes confidential, because then it's it's the design, it's the basic design requirements for that design build contract. So both teams take those and start to progress their designs. So I think it becomes confidential. So if we could move that up, as you said, it's urgent.
So as long as it's moved up before that, then
I
it's
believe
okay.
so. Dan will check on that. And the second point is it's not like we can't make changes once we award the contract or through the design phase. It's just they get more intrusive and expensive the later you make it. You guys know that.
Understood. Okay, so that's our plan, guys. Okay, so anything else on the update on recovery plan, financial plan versus current positions? Nothing? So we are going to ask that the follow-up for you, Rick, is going to be check on what the GET projections are, compare it to ours, and let's see where we are. Thank you very much. Let's now move to agenda item number 6, which is Hart staff report. Any member of the public here to testify on that? No, nobody online. Thank you. So Hart staff report.
Yeah, I'm just going to give a quick update. We've been working on the quad chart that we've been calling it, which was requested by Michelle. I updated the risk report to be formatted the way that she wanted to see it, and I expect that we can absolutely have a draft by next month of the work product that her and I have been working on. And so that's just a quick executive level summary of progress at the board report. It shouldn't change what's reported at POC.
Okay, any questions, members? I have one comment. I thought that, and whether it's going to be incorporated, remember there you testified that the monthly progress report, for example, the 25% of it is all that the FTA wants. So we have all this additional stuff. So wasn't there going to be some discussion on whether we skinny down that progress report, or, who is it for? I mean, I guess that was the question. Do we comply with the FTA, all that they want, or do we come up with we keep doing it the way it is? Or I think if I remember correctly, Edwin said, well, why don't we do a summary and then attach it as an exhibit, like at the end? And so did we have a further discussion on that among
Internally at Heart, we did. So we met with all of the updaters of the monthly progress report last week, did a page turn, and found out where their pain points are, what they find useful, and what is duplicative in the report. And so I think when you see this next report, the September report, it'll be streamlined a bit. You know, those gas gauge curves will be off, and I think one more contingency graphic that nobody looked at, those will be off. And then there'll be slight changes based on internal preference. It shouldn't change the report at all. And then the next stop was to complete what Michelle's requesting. And her intent, I believe, if that satisfies and we all come to agreement that it's beneficial, that we could roll one of those pod charts out for each major project and eventually maybe incorporate that streamlined version into the progress report. But I believe Michelle's intent was to land on the format for board reporting and see if we can't utilize that more and streamline the progress report, but open to any suggestions on that.
It would seem like the progress report would fall under you,
Yes.
the POC, because that's where we discuss it.
Mhm.
And I think Michelle was more interested, I think, in how it's presented to the board. But that I just remember that you had this amazing percentage that said 25% of the report is really all that's technically relevant, and we have all this other stuff on it. So
Okay, so at the next POC, basically, when I did that page turn, I think at the full board, or no, it was at POC when you were absent, Kika. I took down everybody's comments, and we incorporated those comments in this last report revision and made a couple tweaks based on those internal preferences. So at the next POC, when I walk through it, I'll just highlight those Manini type changes and then go from there. That works.
so how many pages is it?
I don't even think it probably took off maybe 2-3 pages. It's not a lot of tweaks.
It's not a lot. Yes.
Chair, just a question. I shared with Michelle the citizen-centric report. Did she share it with you, and
She did.
was it helpful?
Yeah, she did. It was helpful. And we can take that reporting any way that the board finds it beneficial. It's just, you know, having everybody agree on what the form and format looks like, and we can run with it. But yeah, those were helpful. Thanks for sending.
Anyone else? Not? Thank you very much. I think you were the only staff report
Yes.
that we're going to have. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Yes. Thank you, Art. I hope you lose. He's not hearing me. Yeah, he's going to golf. So I said, I hope he loses. He's walking out of my meeting. You're not golfing, huh? Huh? Oh, thank you. Number 7, agenda item number 7, city center utilities relocation traffic impacts. Anyone in the audience? Doesn't seem like it. Anyone online? No. So with that, Joey, please.
Good morning, Chair and members. Thankfully, today I have no major issues to report to the board.
Okay, members, any questions on that? That's I think a very good sign. So we have no gas line, nothing. Okay. So with that, members, I assume nobody has any questions other than why? No? Okay, thank you very much, Joey.
Thank you, Chair.
So agenda item number 8 is the resolution 2023-9 approving notification to the city council of intention to acquire by eminent domain an easement in the real property identified as tax map key 1-2-012-013 located at 610 Pu'uhale Road, Honolulu, Hawaii 96819 and owned by TNI Properties 1 LLC. This is the resolution that we discussed briefly under committee report number A. So the question go with the. Oh, is there anyone here to testify on this matter? Any staff? I don't see Krista or anyone. No. So it's just. Oh, this was Roselle. Roselle was here the last.
Yes, but I
time.
believe that this is the matter that one of the matters that we were going to defer.
Oh, I
Correct.
see.
Yes.
This one didn't come in. We agendized it.
Yes.
Members, I'm very sorry, but this matter has to be deferred because we did not post it on time. So we will have to defer this to the next board meeting. The resolution itself, which required to have certain tweaks, I believe, at the last GLAM meeting, and it didn't come in on time. So with that, members, the chair is deferring this to the next board meeting. Next is agenda item number 9, which is the establishment of permitted interaction group to investigate the fiscal year 2024 and 2025 operating and capital budgets. Members, this is, Robert Yu is interested in looking in detail on the budget, and the decision was that we would come up with a PIG, and we need to officially, I guess, establish it at this meeting. Robert, do you want to say anything on this? Oh, wait, before you do that, sorry. I assume no one's here to testify on this because I don't see anybody, but I need to ask, and no one online. Sorry. So please, Robert.
Thank you, Chair. Just one comment. Do we have to include fiscal year 24 and 25? Could we just make it in a more general way, like to investigate fiscal year operating and capital budgets? Is
We
that
can always,
possible?
yep. So when we do a motion to establish that permitted interaction group, we will make the motion in that form. I don't believe, because we don't have a motion yet. You just would say it that way.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure. That would be great. Then I could
Yeah.
talk about it without.
So you
Okay,
can
so
make your motion.
okay,
You're gonna-
so
Establishment of a permitted interaction group to investigate the fiscal, operating, and capital budgets.
fiscal year operating and capital budget. Yes, Chair.
Okay, that's-
So I move.
Just so move. Second with 2 seconds, moved and seconded. So the discussion among the members, any discussion? I would like to say that well, you know what? I'll give you the membership when this passes. Any other discussion? If not, it's moved and seconded, no discussion. Do I have unanimous consent?
Chair?
Yes?
I'm sorry, I think you need to specify the members of
Oh,
the
I do
committee
have to
prior
specify,
to
okay.
the motion, yes.
So the establishment of the permitted interaction group will include, Robert Yu will be chair, and I know I don't have to designate a chair. However, I find that it works better. And the members will be Edwin Young, Art Tolentino, and myself. So that's the establishment of the permitted interaction. Do you have any objections?
No
Chair?
objections.
Thank you. So with that, any further discussion? If not, do I have unanimous consent? I have unanimous consent. Thank you very much. So your PIG is established, and it's going to be up to you to call your meetings.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next item is item number 10, which is the revisions to Board of Directors rules and policies. As I mentioned earlier, we are going to have to defer this because we got comments late past the 48-hour posting from people who not only we received some from Lori, we received some from the Attorney General, we received some from CORE, and we received, I think, from certain members as well. So we are going to defer this because unfortunately the comments were generally stated in terms of in a prose form versus Ramseered. In other words, we're going to have to now take everyone's comments and kind of Ramseer the board rules so that you get to see what it is. So it needs a lot of that. But because of that, I'm going to defer this matter. Yes.
Chair, if I may. So since the confidentiality agreement now is incorporated in the rules, I think it would be good to have a discussion actually on the agreement itself. And as you mentioned, it seems there are different interpretations of the proposed rules. I think there are different interpretations of the agreement. So if we could include that, I think it would be a good idea.
Yes, I think what you will see is that even with the Attorney General's position as well as the what the Attorney General is has taken issue with is whenever there's a differentiation between the board members. The fact that the confidentiality agreement is signed by all members, in fact, this confidentiality agreement is signed by all employees, as far as I know. So it's, if we do the change, it really would require probably a change for everyone. So we can have that discussion when we discuss these rules in the next meeting. But we will have a meeting, yes.
Yeah, Chair, so if the intent is to, I'm assuming the intent is to put forward a document in Ramsey format, incorporating all the comments and proposed amendments by various parties, but if on one particular section or provision, there's differing amendments, differing proposed language, conflicting proposed language, how is that going to be reflected in a Ramsey document?
That's a good question, Kika, because I would prefer not to have to do that, because it's a hell of a lot of work to actually take comments and try to incorporate it into a Ramsey format, whether it's eliminating sections or whatever. So if the board's pleasure is that we just simply have everyone's comments on the table, and I intended that you would have the comments anyway, and then you discuss it, and then however people come out with, that's fine. The problem is going to be that it's very difficult, I believe, to have a discussion when you're drafting at the same time what the changes are going to be. So in other words, if you have a position on, hypothetically, on a section regarding the POC committee, and somebody else has a different interpretation of what they'd like to see the POC committee do, we have conflicting statements. So what I would normally do, and I think I've done this in the when I got comments from Michelle, for example, and they may conflict with the original language, is I would highlight it and say this is a proposal. So if there's two different proposals on the same thing, I would highlight it and say this is Kika's proposal and this is, somebody else's proposal. So that's, to me, that's a difficult, time-consuming effort. So I would be more than happy not to have to comply with a Ramsey situation. The Ramsey situation just makes it very easy, I think, for everyone to look at, okay, what was the original set of rules and what does it look like now? So believe me, I would be very happy if you said, we don't need to do that. Just give us the original, whatever your comments are, what everybody's comments are, which you would get anyway. I would give you everybody's comments, but not have to doing the Ramsey format would make my life a lot easier. Yes.
And just one practical note is that any suggested edits from CORE are going to be privileged and confidential.
Right.
So we can discuss those in executive session, but it might be another set of edits on top of the ones that the board is already doing.
Yes, and I would ask CORE to Ramsey or whatever they say. I have no sympathy for you guys. You guys can Ramsey it. I just don't want to see the all-volunteer board have to sit there and, yeah. So if you gave it to me that way, fine. But if you didn't, that's what would be required. And quite honestly, I did that with the regulars, with what you have now. And that's why if you look at the comment section, it would say these are Michelle's or whatever else. And the other thing I do is I think I made Michelle's comments purple, yeah. Do you remember? But it was all color. Yeah. So because it's easier too, then you know who's making the comments. And the financial portion, and this is Robert's thing, originally, just so that full disclosure on this, so the financial thing, originally, if you remember, Lynn McQuarrie and Dean Hazama were part of the original PIG. So Dean produced a lot of information on how he believed the financial section should look like. And I had asked him specifically that I don't like the two documents. I believe our rules are rules, so that the financial policy, which was separate and apart from the rules, we put the financial policies all in the rules, and it was Dean who did the heavy lift on that. So it's up to how the board wants to proceed. I'm more than happy just to attach all your comments as opposed to having to go through a Ramsey. Believe me, I would be more than happy to do that because Ramsering it is.
Sorry, also,
me.
Chair, you can't receive comments from everybody else now. I
Oh,
could,
yeah.
but
That's
yeah,
right. Well, you'd have to do it.
I can do it.
Yeah, he can do it. Sorry. That's right. Because I was able to do it because it was in the context of the pig. Right. So those comments were done in the context of the pig.
So I guess if like, so I submitted some comments. I mean, can that be attached to whatever Ramsier? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
I have no problem for everyone to see the comments that I have.
Well, technically they are public. I think everyone's
I did
comments-
incorporate your comments, Kika, in a Ramsey format.
In Ramsier.
Yes.
But can you also include the document itself so that people can flip through it?
You mean your document with the comments? I could. Yes.
Okay, I got no problem.
I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't realize you incorporated it, but I didn't.
Yes.
So yeah, so that's the whole thing. It's just Ramsier is easier if you're looking at changes. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think, Chair, we have comments from all the members of the PIG, and I think if any other board members want to look at the rules before the next meeting, they can send comments to me, and I can try and incorporate
I think
everything.
they did. I think Edwin sent comments. Didn't you send comments, Edwin?
Great.
Yeah. So I think yeah.
All right, then I can take those.
And then there's the public comments. I think Laurie sent comments, so you'd have to incorporate Laurie's comments.
Is it possible, Chair, that maybe everybody can receive the most current version of the Ramsier?
I think it is attached, isn't it?
Yeah, I know, but I want a soft copy so that I can. Yeah.
Isn't it in here?
Yes.
Is it on the agenda? Is it on the website?
Right here. No, because I was receiving
Okay,
comments,
okay.
you know,
Oh, so
even
you
as
didn't
late
put
as
that in
yesterday. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
That's
you.
fine. Yes.
So just for clarification, because I think earlier when the report was presented, you mentioned that the comments from the PIG members would be Ramsey, and then other members would submit their comments as a separate document. So now you're saying we should all of the comments will be incorporated in a Ramsey format?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Some of it already has, and then Dan Gluck will be incorporating it for.
Yeah, I think I'll keep the master document since Cindy won't be with us. I think
Yeah.
I'll just take that.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. And I do want to give a plug for Dan Gluck. For those of you who don't know, this whole issue of First Amendment rights of government employees plus the public and so forth, Dan argued, and I read the case, of course, Dan, before Judge Watson, and he prevailed. And it was, though it was city related, the person also sued was the Attorney General at that time, which was Ali Shikita. And I thought that it was a very good distinction because subsequent to that, the U.S. Supreme Court decided Kennedy versus Bremerton. Did you see that? Kennedy versus Bremerton. It's recent, and it's the issue of. And it's kind of geeky, but I really thought it was. At first, I thought Dan did a very good job, but the other thing was that the Kennedy case also distinguishes government speech, and there's a difference between government speech and because to put it bluntly, government speech has no First Amendment rights. Would you say that? Government speech versus government prohibiting speech. Government speech itself has no First Amendment protection. And that's what the Kennedy case also verifies. So but anyway, I did want to make a plug because I thought it was a very good argument. And I also enjoyed reading Judge Watson. It was last year? Was it last year?
Yeah, in the fall.
The fall of last year, right? And it was, because I remember running across it and going, hey, he's our lawyer. So the reason I bring that up is be assured that we have we have probably the person who most recently went to the district court and the federal district court and actually looked at this specific issue. So he will be there guiding us. But yeah, there is a U.S. Supreme Court case that subsequently was decided and I thought was also on point. Anyway, having said that, anyone else? Not? Thank you very much. So we are going to defer the revisions of the Board of Directors rules and policies. And unless there's a need, and I don't think there will be, we can do this at the next board meeting, right? next board meeting, or should we have a special meeting on this? We're deferring the revisions of the Board of Directors rules. Yeah. Well, I guess what we'll do is let me have some flexibility on it because as Dan said, and all of you know, but the public may not know, is today is Cindy's, who's been the executive officer of the Heart Board since almost the inception of the Heart Board. So, and today's her last day. So we are going to have to come up with, I think rules may be relevant as to the hiring and firing, not to be firing you, Cindy, but the hiring of board staff. So we may have a special meeting on that, or we may go to the next meeting. So with that, anything else, members? If not, we're going to move on to agenda item number 11. This is the establishment of the permitted interaction group to investigate the scope of the Heart Executive Director and Chief Executive Officer position and executive recruitment. So, is there anyone here to testify on this matter? Anyone online? No? Members, I think we may require unless there's a discussion now, I would like to entertain a motion from someone that we do enter into executive session pursuant to Hawaii Revised Statute Section 92-4 and subsection 92-5A to consider the hire, evaluation, dismissal, or discipline of an officer and employee. Yes.
Did you not jump an agenda item? We're on item 11, not 12.
Oh, okay. Establishment of a permitted interaction group to investigate the scope. You know what? I would like to move that after the executive board meeting. So with the board's permission, I would like to have agenda item number 11 follow agenda item number 12. Okay. So now I'm back to asking for a motion for the executive session pursuant to Hawaii Revised Statute 92-4 and subsection 92-5A2 to consider the hire, evaluation, dismissal, or discipline of an officer or an employee, or of charges brought against an officer or employee where consideration of matters affecting privacy will be involved, and subsection 92-5A4 to consult with its attorneys on questions and issues on a matter pertaining to the board's powers, duties, privileges, immunities, and liabilities.
I'm sorry, Chair, just to clarify, we're on item 12.
I move item 11 after 12, so it will become item 11 and we'll move to 12. So first of all, anyone here to testify? I don't think so because there's no one here. And anyone online? No? So with that,
Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we move into executive session on agenda item number 12.
Second.
Thank you. Second? And we have a second. Members, any further discussion? Yes, Natalie?
Just the note for the record that I understand that since I haven't signed the confidentiality agreement, there's a disagreement between CORE and the AG's office that I will not be allowed in the executive session. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone, any other discussion? If not, do we have unanimous consent to move into executive session? We do. So members, we will move into executive session. So we're going to stay here. The issues regarding the executive director and her responses to the surveys done by the board, and also we discussed what would be, how to proceed with those basic responses and what would be the next step for this board. So with that, we're out of executive session. Item number 11, which was moved below, was establishment of a permitted interaction group to investigate the scope of Heart's executive director and chief executive officer's position in executive recruitment. I am going to defer that matter to the next meeting because the HR chair is expected to be back from her trip, and I think that we need to have her input on this PIG. And in addition to that, I also believe she should be the chair of the PIG. And before putting it on her, I think we should have that discussion. But we're either going to have that will be deferred from this agenda, whether we have a special meeting on some other things and it comes out at that time, we'll let the board members know. So, by the way, were there any public comments on item number 6? On item number 11? Seeing none, any public comments? No. So with that, the next item is the item number 13 was the summary of board members' requests made during the September 15th Board of Directors meeting. Quite honestly, I don't remember what they are, but we'll see them in the next, we did make a decision that we would continue to do the follow-up on board members'
Chair, I can
inquiries.
give a brief
Okay.
summary. I believe, Robert, you had a request to staff provide an FFGA amendment timeline.
Uh-huh.
And then I believe you and Robert, you requested an updated GET revenue projection.
Oh, yes, I
Yeah.
did that. Revenue projections, and I believe Robert gave Rick Keene people to contact on that. Before we go to adjournment, I did want to say
Chair.
yes.
Sorry. Can I add a few items to the follow-up?
Sure.
The most recent Ramsey version of the proposed rules, if that could be forwarded to all of the members. And then I think Robert and I brought up the extended financial plan from Civic Center to Ala Moana. If that can be added as an item to follow up on. And then I would just like to get some kind of direction as to item number 8 regarding eminent domain, going forward, how we're going to dispose of similar eminent domain issues.
Is your specific question whether it goes to POC initially
Yes.
or it goes to
Yes.
government? Okay, we'll have a. So
Thank you.
if you could, we'll discuss that. Okay, and then we'll make a decision. But those are the items. Anyone else have things that they wanted to have added? Not. I know we have adjournment next, but I did want to take the liberty, and if anybody wants to turn me in for sunshine violation, you can. I wanted to take the liberty of thanking Cindy for, excuse me, almost 12 years of service to this Heart Board as our executive officer. And for anybody looking and you see the bentos on the table, yes, we are going to have a lunch, but please be assured that it is not paid for with Heart money or city money. So we will be saying our goodbyes to Cindy. Anyone else? If not, hearing no objection, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Excuse me.
Sure.